Be reviewing a New York Times article with you all about New York City and the struggles with getting back to normal here in New York City. Currently, the city has been experiencing a crime wave that it hasn't seen in decades, since the 90s. That's right. The crime is so bad, it hasn't been this bad since the 90s. Before many of us lived here, many of us were even born. The crime wave, hadn't happened at this level. So let's get into it. A grim January leaves some New Yorkers fearful for the city's future. New York is far safer and stronger than in the 1970s, but after a flood of sad news, many people are struggling to find the grounds for optimism. All right. First, a fire in the Bronx choked an apartment building with thick black smoke, killing 17 people, many of them children. That was on the 9th day of January, a Sunday, the same day as a teenage cashier at a Burger King in Manhattan was shot and killed during a robbery. Then, the following Saturday, a man killed a woman he'd never seen before by shoving her in front of an oncoming subway train in Times Square. A crime that uniquely horrifies New Yorkers, unpreventable and random as lightning. Yeah, it was, I was just like, holy shit, man. This is crazy. There's no excuse for this. None whatsoever. Understand, there is no excuse. Systemic racism does not describe why somebody pushes somebody off the subway tracks. Mental illness does not describe why somebody pushes somebody to their death onto the subway tracks. That is an excuse. It's not an acceptable excuse. We need to be holding violent criminals accountable for their violent crimes. That includes, physical violence, but also stealing. Well, let me continue with the article. You'll see what I mean. All right, 3 days later, an officer in the Bronx was shot in the leg during a struggle. Wednesday, a baby was shot in the face by a random bullet while sitting in a parked car in the Bronx. So a baby isn't even safe in the Bronx. Thursday, a detective was shot, this time during an arrest on Staten Island. And on Friday, 2 officers responding to a domestic dispute in Harlem were shot in an apartment hallway by a man with a stolen gun, killing one and leaving the other in, barely clinging to his life. All these incidents played out in a city still struggling from the coronavirus and grappling with the Omicron variant of the coronavirus, which has kept empty storefronts empty and delayed indefinitely the return of office workers and a sense of normalcy. Well, I can tell you right now that the office workers are going to be delayed because, most of them are only going to come in a couple of days a week. They've been going in regardless. And that's where we're at. You don't need as much office space. That's the way it is. We're not going to eat at your restaurant every day, unless you're like me and you go to the coffee shop every day, because that's what I like to do. Support small business. All right. The march of terrible news has felt dizzying, leaving many to question the very soundness of the city beneath their feet. Their home, a place that for many has felt unfamiliar of late. In dozens of interviews around the city this weekend, New Yorkers, young and old, lifers, newcomers, described a new deep unease at what looks like an erosion of social norms in the sense of the security that they remember before the pandemic. So basically, that means that people feel unsafe. New Yorkers are feeling unsafe right now, and they're justified. Like the liberals would tell you, the left-wing people, the wokeness, all that. They will tell you, oh, systemic racism, oh, mental health, oh, this and that, something, 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 something. Oh, they're poor, something, something, something. We're all poor in New York. We're struggling under this, expensive rent. And with the exception of, millionaires and billionaires, of course, but the rest of us who aren't millionaires and billionaires like me, we are, we're all struggling in our own way to make it in New York City. And like, truthfully, the liberals and the left wing will not tell you this, and the right wing won't tell you this either. Yeah, people love to track the liberals, but the right wing won't tell you this either, which is that the violent crime and the chaos ultimately will impact black people the most. Black people and other minorities will be the most impacted by the violent crime, by the chaos of the city. In order for the city to be successful, it needs to be safe. Eric Adams said, you don't have prosperity without safety. It's the same concept as Susie Orman's, you don't have wealth if you don't have health. So, moving forward in the article, it feels like it's getting worse. And I don't know what they're going to do to straighten it out, says Michael Marcus, a barber trimming a customer's beard in Harlem, just a block from the fatal shooting of the officer. They have to think of something. At age 54, Mr. Marcus is old enough to remember hard times in the city like the crack wars that led to thousands of murders a year. While it is true that shootings and homicides have increased since 2018, they remain a fraction of the bad old days of New York. In 2021, there are 488 homicides compared with 2,262 at their peak in 1990 after a decade-long stretch near or above 2,000 homicides per year. But what Mr. Marcus sees today worries him. Things happened in the 90s, but not like this, he said. Now, a lot of people are dying in a lot of different ways. You've got coronavirus, you've got shootings, you've got stabbings, you've got people being pushed onto train tracks. Right now, I don't feel like it's going to get better. And if it does, it's going to take a while. And I'm like, look, if you're waiting for, and I would tell Mr. Marcus, if you're waiting for left-wing liberals to fix it for you, yes, it will take a while, because their goal is everybody's got to not be poor, and there's got to be zero systemic racism, and all of the mental health people have to be properly housed in a mental health facility before you can get any of the safety that you wish. And I'm here to tell them that this is crazy. You can't wait for everything to be perfect before you start, holding people accountable, regardless of the systemic racism, the mental health issues, and regardless of, all this other, their income status or income level. So, going on in the article, in Corona, Queens, Amanda Ingham, 22, said that his work as an Uber driver has given him a picture window view of the uncertain state of the city. We're in this rocking boat on the ocean, he said. We can make it work, but if another big tsunami comes, it's going to hit all of us. But he has faith New Yorkers will prevail in their persevering attitude. Not everyone seems so sure. In Flushing Meadows Corona Park in Queens, beside Frigid Meadow Lake near the site of the World's Fair in 1939 and 1964, proud displays of urban might before the entire globe, Eliza Zhu, 50, stood inside. A nail salon employee out of work since the pandemic began, her dismay runs from the cost of scallions in her grocery to the melees that has washed the colors out of her daily life. No hope, she said. No parties, people don't need to buy nice clothes, no makeup, life's too boring, it's tiring, we're still not finished, still in the pandemic. And then came the death of the woman pushed before the train who was an Asian American, a group singled out for hate crimes during this pandemic. I'm afraid because I'm Asian, she says. Now imagine that. She said, I'm afraid because I'm Asian. I never heard anybody being afraid of being Asian in America, in New York City of all places. Like, like crazy. Totally crazy. She's not crazy, but the fact that she feels this way and it's justified is crazy. She says, we don't go out at night. We don't take the subway. What can we do? No hope, just living. In Prospect Lefferts Gardens in Brooklyn, Carson Gross, 37, recognizes that unease and blames much of it on the pandemic. People have been locked down for so long that they've lost social skills, he said. Little things where you could just say sorry or excuse me could turn into a fist fight sometimes. It just feels like everybody's really on the edge. At McCarran Park in Brooklyn, two friends, Beverly Bryan and Tatiana Tenreiro, said recent weeks have tested their optimism. We're all trying to convince ourselves that there's hope, but we're realistic enough to know that things are not good, said Mrs. Terreiro, 27. She's a writer. Miss Bryan, 41, also a writer, wondered when optimism turns into something close to delusion. New York is tough, but sometimes that's a flaw. I would say that's, I agree with her. That is a flaw. That's New York didn't shut down quickly enough, and that caused a lot of pain because Cuomo was stubborn. De Blasio also stubborn, didn't shut down the city quickly enough when the pandemic first hit. In any case, with everything that's happened, what would constitute a breaking point? Her friend turned to her. Isn't it awful that we just expect all of these awful things to happen? Mr. Ray asked. It's like we're just used to it. It's kind of like the frog boiling, Miss Bryan said. Janet Miller, 81, retired attorney, lifelong New Yorker, said recent events reminded her, like many others in the past week, of a specific era. It seemed to me like it was going back to the 70s, she said, as she walked her Schnauzer, Murphy, around Stuyvesant Town in Manhattan. All the gun violence. Nearby, 6-year-old John Cuban said he misses a sense of security he had felt in recent years. Me too, John, me too. When I was younger, I used to go to the city all the time. I had no fear to ride the subway, he said. Now I have anxiety. It scares me about the subway. In truth, the 1970s were a demonstrably more perilous time for New York City, as borne out by the numbers. Back then, an exodus of employers and taxpayers compounded the city's budget woes, pushing it to the brink of bankruptcy. With no way to bridge the fiscal gap in sight, the state took control of the city's finances. Public employee unions were forced to agree to steep job cuts. Big corporations, including General Electric and PepsiCo, moved their headquarters to the suburbs. In 1975, the city's unemployment rate hit 12%, well above the national average of about 8.5%. And then the city recovered, said Richard Ravitch, who is widely credited with helping that recovery come about. He was named the head of New York State Urban Development Corporation when it was nearly insolvent in 1975, and later chair of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority. He would become the go-to official during the difficult times. Mr. Ravitch was now 88, and what he sees today outside his Upper East Side home and office on East 51st Street feels much different. Yikes. It's hard for me to find a restaurant in the neighborhood to go to for lunch. All the hotels in that neighborhood are closed, and the office buildings are dark, he said. A lot of people are working from home because of the technology available, and we want to isolate because of the virus, and I think a lot of people have moved to Florida or the suburbs. It's causing devastation to the New York City economy. Don't try comparing today with the 1970s in front of Marcus in front of Mary Garvey, 62, a retired school teacher. Not even close. In the big bad days, I've had knives pulled on me, I had guns held on me, she said. As a young woman in the 80s, holy crap. I had men grab every part of my body on the street. I know what bad looks like, and this is not the same. She is a lifetime New Yorker. I called the police every night about hearing gunshots in Park Slope. She said there was open drug dealing in the streets. You could buy drugs at the local bodega. In the Bronx, well, technically you can still do that. But you didn't hear it from me. In the Bronx, near Yankee Stadium, a Navy veteran at Baptist Deacon Rodney Anderson, 52, remembers those bad years less colorfully, but no less vividly, and sees better days ahead. I'm not afraid. I don't live in fear, he said. The city and the country are going through a cycle, and that's how life is. It's got to get better. It has to. It always gets better. Getting things better was practically the job description for Mr. Ravitch, the former city official who spoke Sunday by telephone from his apartment over a recording of Ada playing in another room. People want to go to the Yankee Stadium or the concert halls, he said. I'm an opera fan, as you can hear. He said that on a recent walk up to Madison Avenue, he was dismayed by many empty storefronts, but he saw plenty of new stores too. I think cities are the most important socializing institution that we have ever created, he said. I think young people want to be able to have a drink at the end of the day, meet a girl or a boy. It's going to come back. And that was the end of the article. I mean, what do you think? Do you think it's going to become... What do you think? Do you think New York is coming back? When do you think it's coming back? What do you think we need to do to get there? That's what I think of when I read this article. I see, other articles, on the ragtag New York Post. I mean, granted, they primarily are sensationalists, but I mean, the facts. Sorry, this is the New York Times. They, they do great reporting. But on the New York Post, I've also read articles there, and they basically have a similar accounting of how things are going in New York City, and in articles like the New York Post, they're saying the same thing, and I hear people online saying, "Oh, they aren't. They're a tabloid. They're selling an agenda, this and that, and blah blah blah." And I'm like, look, that's all great. Or not great, however you want to look at it. But the bottom line is, can you dispute the facts? Can you dispute the facts? Does the subway smell like piss and shit? Are people being violent? Are people being pushed off the subway? Are police being shot left and right while just barely doing their jobs? What's going on? I'm like... And the DA, while, some people on the right have, mischaracterized some of his positions, some of his, many people cite the rise in violence to bail reform because it lets criminals right back out on the street. And I don't know how true that is, to be honest. I just think they're letting people with 15 offenses, violent offenses, 15, 20, 30, sometimes 80 back on the street. I think that's just stupid. Oh, we're going to let all the violent criminals out. Oh, I mean, what could go wrong? You let a whole bunch of violent criminals out because of systemic racism. Oh, well, they were poor when they committed the crime and therefore they should get off. I don't know. I just think that's a little nutty, because you can't wait for everything to be perfect before we can have some semblance of safety. I think that's completely ridiculous that left wing and liberals think that everything has to be 100% perfect before we can be completely safe, before we can go to the subway train and know that we are probably not going to get shoved off the subway platform onto the tracks for a train to possibly hit us, or that maybe some random person isn't going to punch us in the face or stab us, or any number of other things, like maybe get stuff stolen from us, or bikes, or we go shopping. Like, there's another article, the Rite Aid is shutting down in Hell's Kitchen because people just go in there, they put stuff in their pocket, and then walk out, like they just carry it in their arms. They don't even put it away. They just walk out with it, and the Rite Aid employees, they can't even stop it. I think it's bullshit. I don't know how you all feel, but I'm like, holy cow, this is not acceptable. No, you can't say, oh, well, the big corporation. Because the bottom line, the people in those communities that live there, that need their prescription, that need the convenience store in the middle of the night when they need like medicine, or water or milk or something, you are telling them that they don't deserve to have that. And to be honest, that affects a that effect happens a lot more in minority neighborhoods. This is the first time that it happened in, a more well-to-do neighborhood in Harlem. There's a Walgreens down the street that shut down, and the Dwayne Reed and the CVS's that are here on my street, they all shut down early, super early, earlier than everywhere else in the city, because people are trying it. People are trying it. And so, when there's an emergency, you're screwed, because people decide to steal, and the city doesn't want to do anything about, oh, well, they have insurance. How do you know how much insurance they got, and how do you know how much it costs? And more importantly, what about the employees who are working there? When the store shuts down, then what are they supposed to do? Then they're out of jobs. And, oh, well, we'll move you to another location. Well, what if that location was the most convenient one that they could work at, that had a position available? Like, people don't think about this stuff. Left-wing liberals don't think about this stuff when they're co-signing on bullshit. And they need to do a better job of thinking about this stuff, about how it's going to affect minorities. Look, I've voted for several left-wing politicians, and I've donated money to a number of them. And then when I see them co-signing bullshit, it makes me super angry. Like, public safety is number one. All the other stuff will come after public safety. Bottom line, like, you're not going to get your left wing, you're not going to get economic justice without first getting the safety issue resolved, because no one's going to trust you to handle their economic security when you can't even handle something simple like violent crime. You can't even, like, you're over here opposing, like, they're over here opposing jail time for violent offenders, and they're trying to, yes, I get it. Bail in a lot of ways was used to house black people and to block them from getting out of jail, when they rightfully should have been allowed to, get out of jail and come to court. But for violent criminals, like, if there was some doubt as to whether or not they did it, then fine. Like, at all, then fine, let them out of jail. But if they're clearly dangerous and they're a threat, like, you caught them right in the act, and or they have like 27 offenses and now they've got another one pending. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why are you co-signing that? You say you're not, but that's what it is. And the people who get hammered the most are the people who don't live in the rich neighborhoods, the regular people, the other black people, the other minorities. We are the ones who have to deal with all of the downsides. So just putting that out there. If you guys have ideas about how you think you would solve it, that doesn't mean everyone has to you know, be perfectly, have the perfect amount of wealth and and racism is 100% gone, and, and, and everyone is 100%, all the mentally ill people are in the mental facility, yada, 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 and everyone is suddenly off drugs. I mean, that's just not realistic. If you got something that is interesting to add, yeah, sure, drop a comment. If you disagree with me, okay, yeah, leave it in the comment. I might read it. I like ideas. I like hearing ideas. You know, I like to juggle them around like balls. um, in any case, let's make it a great day. All right, ciao.